I was there in April, obviously in 1968, when Martin Luther King was killed. 1968 was a very difficult year, and I recall that that it was around 6 o'clock, and I was in Smith Hall, down the hall from my room, and I was in this this white kid's room, and I was laying across his bed, and BSing, and he was playing his music. It was Wilson Pickett, Mustang Sally. Everybody's singing like that, Mustang Sally. I'm laying, and the music is going on, and he leaves the room, and I'm just listening to the music, and he comes back, and he's got this southern drawl accent, and he says, he says, Sylvester, he says, Martin Luther King's been shot, and I think he's dead, and it was just like something just went right through me. No, this can't be true. But then I looked at his expression, and his face was such that he's not. First of all, this is not something you should joke about or even play around with. But just to look at the expression in his face, it was pretty obvious to me that he was serious. My first reaction was, no, this is not true. My second reaction was, yeah, looking at his expression, it probably is true. Mm-hmm. My third reaction was, I was upset that he was the one who told me, even though we had been, we weren't I'd only known him for a while. Yeah. But it was racial then. It was. I was upset that it was Martin and the person who told me was white. That second, I overcame that within probably 10 minutes or maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Yeah. But at that instant, it just angered me. That not angered me, but I just felt very, I was mad at that point. And even though he was saying it in such a tone that this is a bad thing, you could get that from his voice that he was like, how could I was upset that I just felt. I was feeling a lot of things, and that was one of the things that I was feeling. Interesting. And then within a minute it was over, and I think we may have even hugged each other, and it was clear that we both felt very sad about it at the time, and I think that he genuinely felt sad, and my initial feelings subsided pretty quickly, but in that instant. And then we went over to the student center, and because that's where the big television was. Yeah. And so something had happened in the Middle East, and this Arab guy had the news on, and he was, and so the kids were there. They had turned about this, they were trying to find out about this King thing, and this Arab dude walked right past us and switched the news station. Now he was going to be in a big world of trouble. He just walked right up and turned the station to another station because he thought he was going to find something about the Arab situation. Yeah. He was removed physically from the television room. But he had to have a lot of nerve to do that, number one.
Do you think he knew what he was doing?
Yeah, he knew what he was doing. He just walked up and he just changed the station because he was more concerned about his issue. But we were sitting there watching the program intently, and he just did that. And so, but we knew him later. He's just very emotional. He was a very highly strung person. He was not in the same. But anyway, I remember that happening. He was just physically removed from the room at that time because people were not really interested in playing around at that point. Things were real tense, and the most of the teachers of my teachers canceled the classes the next day, except for one, my geology professor, and I stayed because I was going to go back home, but I stayed overnight. That was April the 4th when this occurred, and I stayed for April 5th just to go to his class at 10 o'clock that morning because I wanted to confront him as to why he didn't cancel his class. You know, why did everyone, and why did you do this? And I got there, and before anything could happen, he came in and he started talking, and he said, I only, and it's with this deep Southern drawl, he says, you know, I only have this class today is because I wanted to tell you, you know, how badly I feel personally about what has occurred. And people don't realize what this man has meant to this country, and not only black people, but particularly white people have lost their best friend. And he went on for a few minutes in that vein, and totally caught me off guard because I came there prepared to raise some hell, and he just caught me off guard, and it was a part of a learning experience for me about prejudging people that I had to deal with also, and that we all have to deal with. He had a personal message to give, and he wanted to give it to these kids, and he felt he had to do that, and he did it. He did it in 5 minutes, and he said 10 minutes, short period of time. And then he said, class dismissed, and I will see you in the next few days, assuming everything is reasonably okay for us to continue doing this. And so it really kind of threw me because I was prepared for something else, and he came from a totally different place from where I thought he would be coming from. So I got on a bus. I got a ride to Nashville and then caught a bus to Memphis. I got a bus the reverse. I got a bus to Nashville and then got a ride to Memphis. And as we approached Memphis, we didn't know that it was a curfew, and they had National Guard out there at that point at the time. So you really had to have a pass to go from one point to another. So we're driving along, and all of a sudden, this military jeep, comes up, and this guy with this machine gun mounted on the jeep, turns right out and says, "Halt!" In a very, forceful tone of voice, "Halt!" That kind of a thing, and where are you going? So no, we're just, coming from Nashville. I'm going home, and that's as far as I intend to go tonight. And he gave me a pass, and it said that I would go from a point to, I told him where I was going, and he gave me an estimated amount of time to get there, 25 minutes to get there. But they didn't want people on the street. Things were getting out of control. And, there were riots all over the country. Cities were burning. There was rebellion everywhere, and Memphis too. And things were very tense. And so these guys were trying to maintain a degree of order. And so I went home, and I had to get my little pass, and this person dropped me off, and then he went on home and tried to make it within his scheduled time, because somebody will stop you, and your pass said you just couldn't drive around the city, sort of a thing. The next day, they had this march, memorial march, from Mason Temple, and Mason Temple was the church where Martin Luther King gave that speech the night before. I've been to the mountaintop, I've looked over, I've seen the promised land, and prophetic. I may not get there with you, etc. But we as a people will get there. And it was just a huge number of people. I was among them, and I jumped, and as far as I could see ahead of me were nothing but people. As far as I could see behind me, there was nothing but people. Were nothing but people. Just a tremendous amount of people on Main Street in Memphis. And that's the main drag there downtown. And in American City, at every intersection, or at most intersections, they had troops, they had tanks. This is in the city, huge tanks, military tanks, And then on top of the buildings, you could see these men with these policemen and soldiers with rifles, looking down at this crowd. And you always kind of wonder, like, if this thing gets out of control and turns into a riot, what's going to happen?
Yeah.
Are we going to become like a shooting alley for these people, a galley for these people? What's going to happen here? But everything went calmly. The people who were perhaps involved in the reason why Martin had to come back the second time to Memphis, guaranteed that nothing was going to happen. Police didn't have to be there, but they were there. They guaranteed it wasn't going to happen. It was a group called the Invaders. The Invaders was a local group, black militant group, in the vein of the Black Panthers, and started out with a group of kids, young kids, and that was another reason why my parents wanted me to get out of Memphis, because I knew a lot of these people. I grew up with them. They came out of my high school, many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And Kobe Smith, Charles Cabot, Charles Ballard. An example, Kobe Smith, this kid was brilliant, a merit scholar. He'd gotten a scholarship to MIT. And he left MIT to come back to Memphis to be involved in this thing. He was very serious about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But the movement began to get infiltrated by real criminals. They got infiltrated by the FBI to break it up. And he got framed, and a lot of those kids ended up in prison. And some of the true criminals who would just simply use this as an excuse to riot, etc., and to take whatever out the window. You lost control of it, but you got the sense that somebody had infiltrated this organization and brought these kind of entities into this organization. How do you know who they are? And I think there are people who are real serious about what they were about, lost control of it. And but anyway, that's why King came. They came to Memphis to have this march for the garbage workers, as they were trying to unionize. And he led this march, and he lost control of it. He lost control of it because the invaders made him lose control of it.
Yeah.
They turned that march into a riot. But I don't think it was that true core leadership. I think it was part of that criminal element and that FBI infiltration group that caused it. But anyway, they disrupted that march.
Mm-hmm.
And King had to come back because he had to determine, he had to show that he had control of that movement, that he was planning the Poor People's March in Washington. And if he couldn't control a march in Memphis, this is 1968, and Black Power was coming out. Stokely Carmichael and H. Rap Brown and the Panthers were beginning. And many voices were being heard other than Martin Luther King. And many thought he had lost control. If in fact he really had control, but they thought that his voice was beginning to wane, and others were beginning to rise, and he felt that he had to demonstrate in Memphis that he could control that situation. And in fact, what happened is that they negotiated a deal, with the invaders, and the invaders pretty much guaranteed that the second time around that it would be a peaceful march. They probably got some money for some programs they were from them, guarantees of some money for some neighborhood local programs or group, whatever their interests were at that particular. But anyway, they worked it out, and it was going to be a peaceful march. I mean, it was going to work that way. But then, of course, then he got assassinated. There. But anyway, but at any rate, so we returned to Memphis for that. But it was just amazing to see that sort of a thing in an American city. You see it in the rest of the world when you see people facing cannons and machine guns, but you don't really think of it in an American city. It was a strange kind of a feeling to see a military control of a civilian area like that. But so anyway, that's what that was about, the King assassination, and I was in Middle Tennessee at the time, And I think that it pretty much shocked the campus and shocked the people there.